Her cry was unhuman. Like something dying, it sliced through the heat of that Kansas afternoon. Elias Boone did not locate the horse he had come to purchase when he pushed open the stable door at the Miller Ranch. On the dirt floor, he discovered a young woman trembling so violently that the straw surrounding her body shook like dry grass. She kept attempting to bring her legs together, although they were locked wide apart. But every time she tried, a piercing pain shot through her body, making her scream once more. Elias stopped. He had witnessed broken bones, combat scars, and men who were only kept together by prayer. However, he had never witnessed a lady in such pain that I in a peaceful barn by myself, with the sun beaming as if nothing were wrong. She attempted to stand up on one elbow. Like brittle timber, her voice broke. In a whisper she said, "I can't close my legs." Then she started crying once more, but this time it wasn't because of guilt but rather from a pain that was present in every breath she took. Beside her, Elias fell to one knee. He hasn't yet touched her. He didn't want to scare her. He noticed ancient rope scars close to her ankles, red swelling where the skin had been rubbed raw, bruising along the inside of her thighs, and other evidence that someone had forced her body open long enough to rip her apart from the inside out. Her hands were shaking as she attempted to conceal her legs. "Don't abandon me here, please. It is painful. I am immobile." Something heavy settled in Elias's chest. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a fall. This was brutality. Cruelty carried out slowly. Cruelty committed by a person who ought to have shielded her. He murmured softly while placing his hat on the ground. "Ma'am, Elias is my name. I promise not to harm you. So that I can assist you, let me see what's wrong." She barely gave a nod. Her voice became a ghostly murmur. "Hannah is my name. Take me out of here, please, sir. Please." Elias leaned in closer, steady and cautious. In order to check for bleeding, he reached down to support her leg just enough. Hannah screamed as soon as his palm touched her skin and clutched his shirt with both hands, digging in like a drowning person clutching to a rock. It dawned on him that she had been lying there for hours, if not more. He sensed the heat emanating from her swollen skin. Infection-causing heat was already spreading. Elias Boone did not shy away from hardship. He had never done so. Furthermore, he had no intention of beginning a relationship with this woman. He turned to face the ranch home. There was not a trace of the husband she mentioned. There was not the slightest indication that anyone cared whether she survived or died. That he faced her once more. "I swear to you, Hannah, I'll get you out of here." Her voice trembled as she asked, her eyes widening as fear and hope clashed. "Will danger follow you too, sir, if you assist me now?" Because he was aware of the truth, Elias felt the weight of that inquiry descend upon him like a tempest. Indeed, danger was imminent. "This is the question for you, then. Would you also save the woman if you were in that barn with her pleading for her life and a terrible man who would undoubtedly come back?" Hannah gripped to Elias as if she were clinging to the world's sole remaining solid object. She hissed in pain every time she attempted to pull her legs in cowboy love tails, and her breath came in short, excruciating bursts. Elias was aware that she had to leave the barn immediately. He hoisted her as gently as a man his age could manage by sliding one arm under her knees and the other around her shoulders. She gasped with relief rather than dread. With her head nestled against his chest and her fingers still knotting in his shirt, he carried her out into the sweltering Kansas sun. She briefly gazed at the expansive landscape as if she had forgotten what the outer world looked like. She began to cry again just as the warm summer wind touched her face. She was unsteady and soft, so Elias put her on his horse and steadied her while she attempted to sit without touching her legs. "Now it's simple. I understand you." His voice was serene, the kind that comes only to a man who has endured a lifetime of adversity. She cast a glance at him. There was fear in her eyes, but there was also a glimmer of something else, something little. Hope is attempting to awaken once more. With each hoofbeat he mounted behind her, gripping her with both arms to keep her from falling. Hannah took a deeper breath. She was annoyed by every bump in the road, but she didn't voice any complaints. Never once. "You really are taking me away," she muttered, leaning her head back into Elias. He gave a nod. "Yes, ma'am. Furthermore, we are not turning around." The journey lasted for several hours, during which time the sun moved westward and illuminated the plains with golden western tales. Elias occasionally spoke, but only briefly. When he was younger, he used to break stories about horses, the land, and the weather. Nothing substantial. Just enough to keep her alert and possibly ward off the fear that kept trying to crawl up her spine, nothing that made her shrink. By the time when Boone Ranch appeared, Hannah was shaking from fatigue. The sound of animals from the far pasture, the red barn doors, and the white fence lines. She felt as though she had entered someone else's world, where people didn't yell and the air didn't sting. After carrying her inside, Elias summoned the housekeeper, Mrs. Harper, and instructed her to bring clean linens and warm water. Hannah made an effort to express regret for being a burden. He gave a headshake. No, not at all. For the first time in years, she believed him because of how straightforwardly he put it. She gave herself permission to relax. However, as she closed her eyes and listened to Old West tales, a single thought resurfaced. Caleb, her husband, would come looking. This is the actual question. When a harsh man finds out the woman he tormented is no longer there, what would he do? And when that man arrives at Boone Ranch, what will Elias do? Are you prepared to fight? After just 2 days at Boone Ranch, Hannah began to experience problems. Elias was the first to notice the dust, rising over the fence line in a long, thin path. Fast-moving, unfriendly riders. Inside, Hannah was lying down on cushions that Mrs. Harper had filled with brand-new cotton. Elias then quietly left and closed the door. Caleb Miller rode right into the yard as if he owned it because he didn't want her to hear the irate yells coming towards the ranch. "Bring my wife out here right now," he yelled, yanking his horse to a halt and pointing a trembling finger at Elias. Like a gunshot, his voice broke. Elias remained unflinching. Since he was 15 years old, he had worked as a cowboy, and he was never particularly alarmed by men's hollering. However, Elias felt a burning sensation in his chest when Caleb spat the word "wife" as if it were property. After getting off his horse, Caleb charged at him that "I lost her to you. I'll pull her back by myself." Elias spoke in a steady tone. "She is in pain. She's afraid. She also wanted to go, so she accompanied me." With a grimace, Caleb wanted to go. "I own that woman. She follows my instructions." Elias was pushed over the line by that sentence. "Not today," he answered, taking a step forward. "She doesn't. Never again." Caleb gave him a shove. Elias pushed back more forcefully. With a wild swing, Caleb struck Elias just under the eye, causing the skin to open and his eyesight to go blurry. One of the ranch cowboys fled the barn before the hired hands could mob him, exclaiming that Elias wasn't battling alone today. And that was all it needed for the entire thing to blow apart. The hired laborers rushed in behind him as Caleb charged at him once more, swinging wildly with more rage than purpose. Elias smashed him into the wall of the water trough after ducking and grabbing him by the front of his shirt. The ranch cowboy and Elias moved like men with purpose while the hired hands leaped in. These lads were surprised by the strength that years of ranch work had given them. The ranch cowboy pulled the other one back by his collar so forcefully that Elias howled as he threw one on the ground. Elias then turned to face Caleb, who was clambering like an enraged rooster. "If you ever get close to her again, Elias will seize him by the collar. You had best bring a preacher. And prepare your final remarks." Shaking with anger, Caleb retreated, but he was too afraid to move forward once again. Shouting that this was not the end, he spat in the ground, got on his horse and rode off. With his chest heaving, Elias stood in the settling dust. Fully aware that the battle had only just started, Hannah had heard enough inside the home, behind the door, to begin shaking once more. She trembled this time, though, for a different reason. At last, someone intervened between her and the man who was listening. The actual storm was now approaching. If you're still here, please click the subscribe button to ensure you don't miss what comes next. Then, take a warm cup of tea, settle in, and let me know what time it is, where you are, and where you are listening. That day, Caleb rode off, but the dust he left behind never truly settled. Elias was aware of it. Hannah was also aware of it. The entire ranch seemed to be holding its breath, and the air felt heavier. Elias was sitting at his kitchen table that night, sipping a cup of black coffee and gazing at the wall as though the solution may be engraved in the wood. However, Elias couldn't stop thinking about Hannah sleeping in the spare room, at last warm and secure, and how all of that could be destroyed if Caleb arrived with the law at his side. "Mrs. Harper, keep an eye on her," he added after getting to his feet and grabbing his hat. "I must visit an old friend." It took about an hour to get to Dodge City. Elias was moving quickly. Worry can make a horse fly, but it's too quick for a guy his age. When he tethered his steed outside the sheriff's office, the sun was setting. Inside, Sheriff Cole Harding was seated at a desk piled high with documents that he was obviously not reading. The moment Elias entered, he looked up. "Now, Boone, I only see that face when something negative has occurred. Before you fall, take a seat." Elias sat, but his jaw remained clenched. Cole heard everything Elias had to say. He had noticed every unsightly detail and mark on her. From that saddle earlier, Caleb had spat out every word. Cole reclined and bit the inside of his cheek, as he usually did while attempting to maintain composure. "Elias, that man's actions were unquestionably illegal. However, the law does not always function as it ought to. You are aware of that." Elias said, "I know. However, I'm not returning her. Not as I'm inhaling." Cole gave a slow nod. "Then we do this correctly. We ask the physician to draft a statement. We locate anyone in Abilene who has ever witnessed Caleb extend a hand to her. When Hannah is strong enough to speak, we bring her in. And we use everything to evaluate Wilbur before Caleb does." Elias felt a slight weight lift off his shoulders for the first time during the day. It wasn't gone, but it was lighter than he was. Got up, gave Cole a handshake and "Bring her tomorrow," the sheriff replied. "We'll ensure that both of you are heard by the judge." The judge said, "Tomorrow never came." Delayed the hearing, stating that he required additional witnesses and appropriate declarations. Elias rode back for the next 2 weeks. Back and forth between Dodge and Abilene City, conversing with neighbors, getting together. Letters, even pleading with the physician to visit. Twice to see how Hannah was doing and to write his conclusions. Hannah inquired each night if any progress was made. Additionally, each night, Elias advised her to wait a short while longer. Elias went back outside. The lamps and the sky were becoming purple. Were glowing down Front Street to life. Hannah was waiting for him in bed at Boone Ranch, her hands clenched in her lap. "Is he coming back for me?" And Elias knew he had to tell her the truth, she whispered. "This was just the beginning of the war. This is the question for you, then. What happens if a judge in Dodge City must decide between a nasty spouse and the wife who has the courage to speak out against him?" The Dodge City courthouse seemed colder than any winter wind Hannah had ever experienced on the morning of the hearing. With her hands clenched and her breath trembling like a leaf attempting to remain motionless, she sat next to Elias. The doctor was the first to speak, followed by an Abilene shopkeeper and a neighbor who had witnessed Caleb yelling so loudly that the hens flew. There was no sign of Caleb himself. He was still untouched by the law enforcement officers. At last, Hannah's turn came. Her feet were unsteady as she slowly stood up, but her voice managed to be steady enough to fill the entire room. Pain was not mentioned by her. The hardest nights were not mentioned by her. She just talked of her desire for safety, calm, and the freedom to close her eyes at night without fear. Even Judge Wilbur remained silent for a considerable amount of time after she was done. After clearing his throat, he uttered the words that altered her life. Judge Wilbur declared that Hannah would obtain a temporary protective order, preventing Caleb from coming near her and from Boone Ranch. He clarified that a hearing is planned for the near future. After more witnesses were assembled, and the police had enough time to find Caleb. Although that wasn't the ultimate triumph, it was the first significant move in that direction. The space seemed lighter and brighter, nearly sacred. Hannah took a seat and released her breath. Her first free breath came out. Taken years ago. Elias gave her a look and, when she turned around, nothing needed to be stated. Certain moments convey everything. Without saying a single word, months went by. After her strength returned, Hannah assisted with the kitchen, the garden, and the horses. Every night, Elias would find himself listening to her murmur as she folded laundry or seeing her giggle with Mrs. Harper. And he came to a mild yet certain realization. Both she and he were recovering. When Hannah woke up early one crisp morning, pale and lightheaded, Mrs. Harper grinned in the way that only elderly ladies do when they already know the solution. The doctor verified it later that day. Hannah was expecting a child. Elias froze as she informed him. Then, as if someone had taken his breath away, he sat down firmly. He wiped his eyes, laughed under his breath, and responded, "Well, I will be," allaying her fears that he was upset. Observe that life manages to find a way. It was more than just a child to Hannah. It was evidence that she had never been damaged. It served as evidence that kindness can flourish in ways that hate cannot. Caleb ultimately learned that Hannah was expecting the news when he was far out on the plains. He froze, shocked that she was actually capable of bearing a child. Then he murmured that this was not the end, his face contorted with a mixture of regret and absolute rage. She also felt deserving of love for the first time in a long time. True love, the type that endures, calm love. Let me ask you a question now. Would you have had the guts to intervene when no one else would have if you had been Elias Boone? Would you have dared to start afresh when everyone advised you not to if you had been Hannah? Please hit like if you were even somewhat moved by this story. You wouldn't believe how much it helps. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story that awaits you along this dusty old path. After pouring yourself another cup of tea and settling in, tell me where you plan to watch tonight.